Welcome to the Comic Binge. I am your host, Paul Herman, and today I have a very special guest that I've got to know through the wonders of social media. But you know what? I'm glad I have, because just talking to him for the first, in person for the first like 15 minutes, I can already tell we'll be mega homies and could go on probably for 20 hours straight at talking about comic books. So I'm excited. I hope you're excited. Today we're going to talk about research material for comic books, and that's I think a really interesting idea and concept, to be honest. So I'm super excited. But if you haven't already, please, I really appreciate everyone to go hit that subscribe button. I hate saying it, but I lost like 12, I think 14 bots or people who hate me. I don't know, whatever. But I had to get that number back up. If you guys could be so kind to select the subscribe button, like button, interact with the video, etc., etc. Really appreciate it. Today we're going to talk about just all the different kind of resources you can have to research comic books that maybe aren't just comic books in general. So without further ado, I'll bring on the Exalted One himself, Exalted Speed, from X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. Do you have other handles? Is this your brand across multiple platforms?
This has become my brand almost by complete accident. Yes.
Do you have like Instagram and stuff?
No, I've been thinking about doing it. It's just been one of those things. Just like, one, I have a busy life, so I tried to do this as like a hobby, more so than anything else. Mm-hmm. And if I can monetize it later and do stuff with it later, sure. I'm not one to turn that down. It's just right now, I have life, a job. Let's focus on that. This is hobby stuff. Let's not make it the biggest deal in the world.
That's fair. I have no problems here. So for those who don't know, I have got to know the Exalted One himself through X and / Twitter. I hate calling it X, but whatever, formerly Twitter. And I was very impressed with your knowledge of comic books and listen, I can be impressed with someone's knowledge, but it's your passion for the comics that comes out, I think, a lot. You're very critical of things, and that's not a bad thing by any means. I'm very critical too, but I think it's really cool because what's really hard, Exalted One, is that when you are critical, or anyone's critical, if that love and passion still is there within the criticism, that's all that matters to me. And you have that, and I want to say I respect the hell out of that. So kudos to you, my friend.
Well, I always say that, like, if you like it, you don't have to worry about my comments on it. At the end of the day, I'm just listing what I have a problem with. And it's like, hey, this is something I'm thinking about. Maybe it'll lead to bigger topics and other things. But at the end of the day, if I'm critical, it's not meant to be like, you are terrible for liking this ever.
Right.
I like plenty of stuff people would consider terrible. I'm a guy who checks on what Savage Dragon is doing just because.
Don't do this already. Don't do this. I mean, I haven't read Savage Dragon in like 15 years, but I'm sure it's great fun. So, which now that's a whole different podcast that we say in these parts here, Exalted One. So,
perfectly fine.
Which I will definitely get you. I think we'll have to have a Savage Dragon. I have multiple people to get that on, but anyway. So yeah, we're gonna be talking about research materials. I reached out to you, and you said you kind of wanted to do this kind of topic, which I was like, okay, yeah, we'll do that. And now I'm like, after talking with you and have my own research material, I'm like, okay, this will be a lot of fun. So before we get into your topic and we dive into that, let's quickly talk about just how did you get into comics? You obviously have a vast knowledge of it and you love it. How did you get into it?
So if I'm going to discuss my era, I'm going to discuss I'm what I like to call a bust baby. I came after the 90s comic book bust, like late 90s.
Okay.
So but the way I came into comics was a couple of things. One, I had an uncle. He would always give me old comics to read, and that's how I would read them. Okay. So he was like a Bronze Age, Silver Age dude. So he had like collections of Legion of Superheroes, old Spider-Man, X-Men, all that jazz, and I got into it. But I also think I got lucky for one reason. Borders, Barnes & Noble started to stock graphic novels.
Ah, okay.
and I got into comics mostly through that
Hmm.
collections, trying
Okay.
to, and I have like an extensive graphic novel collection. That's actually my primary. That's probably the primary way I read comics
Mm.
because I never liked having only parts of a story, or I want to read the whole story.
Right. 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 Right.
So so I came in during the trade manga boom era, and I got into comics that way. And I was like one of the only kids who was really into that type of stuff at my school. So
Same
I
here.
just like kept looking at, and I kept just digging into everything about it. So um, like one of the important books for me was the Essential Marvel volumes, the big black and
Mm.
white tomes.
Oh, you mean like this?
Yes. My goal is to try and get the Tomb of Dracula set.
Oh God, I'm sure that's a hard one.
Yeah. Yeah, because Gene Colan stuff looks way better in black and white, so I actually really like that version of it.
Well, it's funny, really quick though. Again, tangent. I told you we're going to do this.
Yeah.
Um, you're not wrong because I think anyone, I didn't realize this for like about 3 years ago because I'm a color guy, before, but then for whatever reason, it just kind of dawned on me how important black and white is because you can see all the detail.
Oh yeah.
And like and no offense to the colors back in the day, but and the inkers and whatnot, but like I mean, this is still the inkers, but you know what I'm saying? Like the color would someone wash out the detail to these artists, these like beautiful, like Gene Colan, for example.
Like
Beautiful.
just the process of it would, melt away some stuff just because like that's just how it was. And the printing
Yeah.
process was not great. Like,
Yes.
but after that, I got into various comics. I became a monthly guy. I worked at comic book stores and other stuff. So I kind of got in through that. And I became, and here's the thing, I'm very much a comics first kind of guy. Like, I wouldn't consider myself strictly a Marvel DC fan, but I will say my origin point is Marvel. So I often, so like, I try to fill in gaps from other stuff, but if it's Marvel, I'm pretty sure I'm confident enough to know what it is.
Yeah, same here. I'm a Marvel zombie. I grew up on it. I've just in the last, I'd say 10 years, I've upped my DC history and game and whatnot. So it's and that's the thing though too is it's funny as we're talking about the research materials for comics. It's not just obviously the big two, not just I mean Image or Dark Horse. It's all of the entire medium because the medium obviously eclipses Marvel and DC. It's vast, it's huge, and that's kind of I would say both like not both, but it's kind of an unfortunate thing I think sometimes because there is so much Marvel and DC that like people think like, oh, it's only comics or even how about this? Or sometimes people feel like they need to push back on that. Like, no, this is like too corporate or whatever. And there's corporate parts that suck for sure. But at the same time, I grew up on punk rock and I love independent music and stuff like that. But I also love mainstream music too. It doesn't really matter if it's mainstream or independent. As long as it's good, it's good. It doesn't effing matter if it comes out through distributed through a major thing or whatever.
I
But yeah,
I
go ahead.
had what I like to call the indie crash when I was in high school. So
Yeah.
so to tell you the truth, like around my generation, it was easier to get indie comics in graphic
Yeah.
novel form.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah.
So Um, and for a while, I became a bit of snob about it because that's what you do. You get into something, and then
You're not wrong. Yeah. When you're young. Yeah. Yeah.
you somehow become a snob about it. And for a while, it's like, guys, I'm gonna read superhero comics with real problems, with real stories.
I'm gonna
And
read Invincible.
um, no, it was
I know.
a
Yeah.
bunch of comics about cancer,
Oh
and I was like,
God.
there was like my for some reason my high school stocked a bunch of books with that similar subject matter. So my mom's cancer, Cancer Vixen, and I just burned out on
Damn.
depressing graphic novels
Yeah.
about,
Yeah.
and that happens. And I was like, you know something, I want to read Green Arrow now, and
Yeah.
I ended up
Right.
like going back to uh, and then I kind of got more of a thing because it kind of made me realize that indie has its limitations as well,
Yeah,
because
exactly.
indie has its own trends that they will ride on or die, and there'll always be new trends and stuff. It's never as freeform as you want it to be.
Well
Um,
said. Exalted One,
um,
you nailed it, man. That's perfect.
and I personally, and this isn't anything against the artists or writers.
Sure.
This
Yeah.
should not be like, oh, no. It's just like it happens. That's just any movement.
Yeah.
It's like it's one of those things that just like listen. I I can read your webcomic about your friend's during college and how you broke up with them, but
Yeah.
maybe you could do something else.
Yeah, and listen, like with comics, it's really hard to keep that wave going and interest going when you're starting out. I mean, like there are very few on. I mean, look, I mean, there's Cerebus, there's Spawn, there's Savage Dragon, but let's be real, a lot of these books are staying afloat because the creators are willing it, like they are making it so, not necessarily they are supporting themselves. That's okay, whole different podcast, but it's just really quick to kind of put a bow on your origin story for comics. I think it's interesting because I like how you said like you came in towards the end of like mainstream comics destroyed, they're like the bombed out at this point, and you kind of found them kind of gradually, and how you went to found independent comics and got back into like you just love comics. I mean, whether
Yeah.
it's like you said, like I was saying. So it's interesting, and like the thing about to kind of go back to our main conversation here is I'm fascinated because you are younger than me, but you have so much knowledge. I mean, you're dropping bombs all the time. I'm like, man, Exalted is like going to town, and it's really impressive. And again, I love the passion. But when I came to you, I said, let's give me like a good research. Where can people go to get, like, if you want to get to like your level of, like, besides reading a crap load of comics, which I think we both would agree, please people read a bunch of comic books, but to get the knowledge and the history, like in the vein of like my good friend Alex, Grand, AKA the comic book historian, one of my good buddies, love that guy. Let's start off with, you gave me some lists. Go ahead and throw out one of your things that you think is a
Uh,
vital thing for people
so
to
if I'm
research.
going to recommend something to people to kind of start off into comic book history, because yeah, I'm gonna actually recommend a novel.
Wow.
Um, and this is kind of how I kind of got an interest in history because I'm Jewish myself,
Okay.
so I'm just speaking of that. And for a long time, I didn't really know the Jewish history of comic books, like just in general. And I'm actually going to recommend a fictional account, The Adventures of Cavalier and Clay
Oh, okay.
by Michael Chapin. Um, it is a story about Golden Age comic book artists creating a character called the Escapist and how that process went about.
Hmm.
And it
And
gives
it's
you kind of,
oh, sorry, go ahead, please,
and
please,
it's
please.
a fictional life story, but it kind of gives you a grounding for what the artists were going through and various other things.
Like it's like an analog for Siegel and Schuster and Superman.
Will Eisner, the Spirit, a bunch of other creators. Like it's
Sure.
basically like yes, that, but it's all of this. And it deals
Mm.
with a lot of different topics, and I often recommend it as like, hey, I feel like this is a good like starting point to kind of get an idea of like this is what it kind of also gives you an idea of like what the comic book scene is like and kind of the mythology around it.
Hmm.
Because if there's one thing with comic books, it's a medium mostly told by storytellers. So you kind of have to kind of factor in the exaggerations.
Right, right. And what was it called again? I'm sorry, Exalted. What
Uh,
was it?
the Adventures of Cavalier and Clay.
Okay. Yeah, and this is he's throwing me a curveball on this one, which is, again, I have no problem doing that. I just want to get this. Okay, dude, that sounds really interesting. See, I'm not. The truth be told, I am not the biggest prose reader because I just have really bad ADD, and that's why I love comics so much, and that's why I love audiobooks. So, but no, it's really fascinating. As far as like again the golden age, if you will, like you were saying, that's really interesting. So here, is that right? Is that how? Is that what it looks like?
Cavalier and Clay.
Oh,
It.
killing me. That's good.
I'm sorry.
You're good.
It's
Good. It's a hard time. Good.
because it's the name of the creators, Cavalier and Clay.
Gotcha.
So,
okay. Yeah, there we go. So we'll do Cavalier and Clay here. So, and that's really cool. So I'm gonna go ahead and we'll keep going here. I'm gonna piggyback off this a little bit. I'm curious if you've read this one yet, Exalted,
sure.
because I think to be truthfully told, I've read majority of it, haven't finished it. But I've read it, it's amazing. And I meant to go back to it. Life is busy when you have a kid, let me tell you.
Yeah.
This is 10 Cent Plague.
Oh, I have the audiobook of that. I was
same.
I'm legit going through. Believe it or not, I've been working on a thread calling "The Fall of Comic Books in the 1950s."
Yes,
and that was one of my main. I'm using 2 books for that actually. 10 Cent Plague, and the other one is the Comic Code.
Yeah, I've seen that one too.
Seal of Approval is what it's called, which is a more academic. By the book history, and the reason I'm using that and 10 Cent Plague is that Seal of Approval's the more academic stuff, so it has a lot more true history. 10 Cent Plague has a lot more emotional history.
Yes.
So there's a good way of like kind of balancing. This is what artists and writers think, because oh my god, there is so much misinformation about the 1950s comic book scene, just based on fandom heresy and all that jazz.
Well, and I want people to know too. This, and I haven't finished it because life is busy, y'all. But I want to be real with you too. I've read, and I thought this before I read this book, Exalted, and I think I've talked to this before a little bit. I said this is a whole, not this book, but this era and all that work. This is a podcast series of itself, and just really quickly, I just want us to know. I want people to know and think about, like, because you talked about, Exalted, you were the only kid in your high school that read comics, and like what was any of the things you were into, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of us, and it's getting better. It's still not there, but it's gotten better. And I think a lot of us who will watch the show can feel that way a lot of times, right? A lot of times. And
honestly, I'm shocked that comic book TikTok is a thing.
I've seen it. Right. Yeah, exactly. Right.
I am just legit like, how did this happen?
It's like, good. I'm happy.
I'm not mad. I'm not one of those guys who's like, it's just like, where were you? What did this? Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. Like, people say like the MCU did get people into comics, and the sales, yeah, but the fact that we have an entire generation that's actually making content about it tells me there's more to it than that.
Yeah. So, and I want to say this right now, that what happened here is such a big deal, because it's like when my mom, this is my mom's generation, right? So my mom was like, she's just turned 70, I think. And I remember telling me, we were talking, and she goes, "Oh, when I was a kid, we all read comics. Everyone read comics." And then this guy came in and made everyone feel like SH for liking comic books. And then you had generations upon generations thinking comic books were weird, and only weirdos read comics because of one man.
In all seriousness, Frederick Wortham is just one of those guys I've had to make peace in the fact that I'm going to hate him for the entire rest of my life.
Yeah, same. It's awful. But again, it's a whole different podcast.
Oh yeah, no, totally. But it's important. But I also think that the 1950s are one of the most major historical, interesting points for new comic book fans. That if you're a newer fan, I often recommend you should look into that, because you have to understand a lot of it comes from the fallout. And my God, there's so much lost history there. You want to know how many comic book companies we lost during that period?
Oh yeah,
14. Like, people go on about EC Comics, and it's like, guys, it was not just EC. It was a lot of others, and there's a lot of interesting history people don't know from that era. Like people don't even know like what the biggest selling comics were, which were Disney comics, by the way.
Yeah, Disney, you had, I mean, little Lulu comic books, I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
humor comics, I mean, those were all huge. I mean, my mom was a huge little Lulu fan, which is also the name of my daughter, by the way. And the thing is, like, people don't realize that when my mom tells me, like, everyone read comic books, and when I again, how far I got into 10 Cent Plague, because I got to right where Wortham comes in. And like what he basically helps instruct is madness. And we'll move on from here, but I just want to make this very clear. Wortham, think about rock and roll music, everyone. Rock and roll music, that's what Wortham did. He stopped
Um,
rock and roll music,
if I
basically.
off if I often if I'm gonna make a comparison for people just to kind of give you an idea, imagine if the ESRB kept video games just for kids. Like there was no mature rating. There was, and there's a lot to talk about it, but that's another topic for Deal Tales.
Yeah.
But it's an important historical piece that if you're a comic fan, I would say you should know about. That should always be like one of the
Oh yeah.
like swatches you have.
Swatches.
Yeah,
All
like
right. Go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, like it's like, hey, okay, what are the weird historical facts I can tell people about comics? Okay, oh yeah, fuck that I did. Sorry.
No, you're good. You can swear. No worries. I appreciate it. No
Okay.
worries. So Exalted, what's next on your list here? Let's keep it going.
So I was talking about the one we'll talk about Sean Howell's the Marvel comic story.
Okay.
I think that's an interesting one to talk about because
Oh yeah.
um Marvel Comics: The Untold Story, and this is also a good book of it should not be your only source.
Yeah, I agree with that. Mhm.
If you use like here's the thing, it can give you a baseline for a lot of things, specific eras of Marvel.
Mhm.
Don't just use this book. It's
I
one of
agree.
those. Um, I like it. It's very good to have these stories told. It should not be your only source ever because it has a bias to it that you should know. For one, Jim Shooter's a very interesting, controversial figure in
Yes,
comics.
he is. Yes, he is.
I've talked to Jim Shooter myself at cons, and delightful person. Honestly, like even if you have problems with Jim Shooter's era, you should talk to him. I really
Well, Exalted, have you watched Alex Grand's 8-hour interview with Jim Shooter?
no. I was. It's one of those things that just like I need like a day or couple to process that.
Bro, I did it in a week.
Um,
And it is one of the best. Like I've gone out there being like Alex has done amazing interviews, and then this is like because I'm not kissing my boy's butt because I told him to his face and to everyone that interview is amazing. It's so thorough, it's fantastic, and he has a 4-hour like retrospect, like another additional 4-hour interview on top of that that goes into everything, and he explains his side. I mean, again, like you said, you don't want to take one account as like the definitive Bible, right? But this, like, I agree with you. Like this, you have to go into the story, or excuse me, this book with that in mind for sure. But yeah, go ahead.
yeah. So one of the reasons I ended up having sympathy for Jim Shooter was he was actually talking about his first time at Marvel and how at the time Marvel was losing freaking money when he was going in because half the books were not going to be making out to print,
Oh yeah, I
and
remember.
he would have to pay for all of the books. And that was just something that was happening at Marvel. Like it was like, okay, we're only putting out
Mhm.
half of it. But again, it's one of those things of just like I think it's one of those books that I think you should kind of keep in mind. But, and I say, hey, if you want kind of like a good baseline, this isn't
Exactly.
too bad. It's
I
not the worst one ever. And, and sometimes having that baseline is important because then you can start questioning things. You can question parts of the narrative, and you can also question perspectives.
You bring up a that is a great point, Exalted One, because the thing is, this is a great baseline. And I think, I listened to this in audiobook format. And I remember driving home back and forth to work for like a month, plowing through this. And I loved it. Now, you definitely can tell when there's not, I wouldn't say an agenda. That's not the right word, but like you said, there's one perspective. And there is it, like, just especially with the Perlmutter years, where like he really makes it sound like that's like just dog shit, basically. Which
I
I'm like, yeah.
I'm of the opinion it's one of the most interesting eras for Marvel to talk about because
Mhm.
listen, Marvel is what it is because of the 90s, and that story should be told, in my
Yeah, I
opinion.
agree. No, I agree. And so, yeah, okay, yeah, dude, I'll probably listen to it again. But what I will add to this is that it is a great baseline, like you said, a great baseline, because I learned, because there's only so much you can ad lib without like, or you can add and have like a narrative to, that's not just plain lying. And a lot of this track that I kind of remember, but like but the way he puts together, you do learn a lot about what went on, what led to what, maybe like, but maybe in everyone's perspective, or like, it sounds better than other person, whatever. But you get the broad history, like you said, a baseline, and that's critical, I think, for understanding, I think, what went down at Marvel, no matter what era, right? Any
Yeah,
era, it just, you get to, he does get the broad strokes down enough where it's I think it's still fascinating. So
yeah. Like I said, I recommend this book as like kind of a beginner book, and
oh,
honestly, I
okay.
wish there was a very good DC Comics version because my
Yes.
God, I would love one talking about the '70s, specifically the DC bust.
Yeah, I hold that thought, because we can talk about that, because I've got there's material. We'll talk. Really quick, and we'll move on to your next one. Um, did you read Slugfest?
Slugfest. That's one I've been in the middle of trying to find a good copy of. Um,
Audiobook.
yeah,
Audiobook.
I'm
It's
probably going to get the audiobook at some point of
Mhm.
just because again, I tried to collect various materials.
I hear
Right
I've
now
got
it's
it.
just been
Okay.
right now it's kind of like I have a balance of getting comics and various materials. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get this for my Twitter. I wish I could make this tax deductible, but until then,
I know exactly. Yeah, but really quickly, Slugfest, I would say it kind of brought very basically does what this does for DC, and helps set up why there's that rivalry. It's actually
yeah,
not a bad book. It's just not super in depth. It's not as in depth as I wish it was,
oh
but
yeah,
but at the same time, it still does a pretty good job of explaining those early years, and how awful DC editors were to people and everything. So I mean, there's some good, yeah. And this, we'll touch on Scott McCloud. You can't talk about this without Scott McCloud. We'll talk about it.
believe me, I have every book by Scott McCloud ever. So yeah,
There
let's.
you go. Okay.
So believe me,
All
I
right.
can talk on this. But I didn't actually bring up Scott McCloud books because I want to talk about history. His was more comic art theory,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
and
I
I want
Good.
and that's very different than talking about history. He does go into history in his books. That's
A
like
little bit.
that's
Yeah.
that's how I learn a couple details. But like, but art theory is different than history.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're talking mainly about history, and like, and this, I have this, and this is really cool. I mean, like, I think this really breaks it down super well. The thing about this, though, is, and this, with any art form, you got to be careful how, again, everyone's different, right? I read a good chunk of this, and I'll be honest, like, I felt like, I'm like, I don't really, I mean, this is gonna sound really arrogant. It is not meant to be arrogant, but I'm like, I don't really need this,
Um,
because because
it's
it's just, I just, you know what I mean? Like,
it,
I kind of know what's going on. Does that make
it's
sense?
yeah, no, there are some books I consider good for normies. That is like the ultimate good for normie comic book to kind of give them an idea of like, hey, you never really thought about this when reading comics, you know?
Mhm.
Like, I give it to manga fans who really don't understand like differences between panel layouts and styles.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really
Exactly.
good for it's good. It has its place. It's just not something I use for that
Yeah,
specific purpose.
exactly. Well, so let's move on to your next. What's your next one that you want to talk about real quick?
Let's see. I'm just trying to remember what list I gave you, but we'll do this one. And I use it because I feel like it's a historical one. In and of itself, is the Jim Steranko History of Comics.
Yeah, this is fascinating. Now you get now this is unfortunately people, this is not these are not available to like they're not readily available necessarily. We'll just say that. But
If
yeah, go
you
ahead.
can, they're on specific, easy available sites.
Yeah, yes, that is true. And I only endorse those for to use those things when they are out of print and the companies refuse to reprint them. Let's just make that very clear. Um dude, I gotta tell you, I knew he now I'm talking a lot. I won't let you talk, so I apologize,
Oh yeah.
Exalted One. But I had read about these magazines that he
Yep.
did. And I'm like, I was like, oh, I should get I didn't really think about it until you showed me these and went, oh, F, like they're on here. This is awesome. So
Oh yeah.
anyway, go ahead, explain these a little bit to the audience and
So
how why they're important.
these were released in the 70s or so, and they were meant to be 6 volumes, but only 2 were ever made. So, you know, but what's there is interesting. And what's important is you could kind of see the beginnings of fandom opinions and various things because this is one of the first academic, or, well, not really academic. And keep in mind, these books are biased in their own way because it wasn't
Sure.
peer reviewed, but it's told from like artists who worked in the industry. Jim Steranko, and he tells the story of golden age creators, comic strips, and he connects them up to pulp stories as well. Like he was probably like this is probably one of the first books that connect Batman to the Shadow and various other things.
Interesting. I
It's
didn't
a
know that.
very
Okay.
important book historically, and you're not going to see people talk this up, but and this is one of those, like I said, it's great, but this is like one of some of the first comic book history that was written down. And while it's not like something you should use as your main source, it's important to kind of realize how far we've come and just how we got this information out. Like, we get the Bill Finger, Bob Kane stuff in this a bit. We get comic strips and how they connect because comic strip history onto itself is also comic strips trying to disconnect from comics
Yep.
of
Yep.
we're not them. Uh, the best way to describe it, comic strip creators went to college, comic book creators went to work.
That is well there. That is 1000%, dude, man. God, that's you're nailing it today, Exalted. That is wow. That's
Yeah,
all. So this is in the Jim Steranko. If you Google it, if people were to Google this and try to find it in various forms, well, who would they be Googling in there, Exalted One?
the Jim Steranko History of Comics. It has a Wikipedia page, so you can find out information about it there. And like I said, I would really recommend you seek this out if you kind of want to get an idea of how like a lot of comic opinions did actually form from this. Like I said, it's one of the first academic type things that connected superheroes to pulp tradition.
Hmm.
Like,
Interesting. That it makes sense because Steranko is like, that's
yeah,
his
and
era.
Jim Steranko has great. He talks about various pulp characters that you probably never heard of. Like people bring up the Shadow, but there's so many unique, weird ones people don't know about, like the Phantom Detective
Hmm. Hmm.
or various. I think there's a guy called XS9. I gotta look up his name later. So if I got his
Isn't the
name wrong,
spider part of that too? The
oh yeah, the
spider.
Spider, who's like
Yeah.
he's like the Shadow but more violent.
Yeah, he's more yeah, so
Like
there's
people
yeah,
like
go ahead.
people bring up like how the Shadow is like, man, he's more serious than Batman, but then you get the Spider and Shadow's like, whoa, man.
Cool it down now. um yeah, no, I'll be honest, man, when you I'm treading lightly here, Exalted. When you showed me this, I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to put a bookmark in that one myself. So, I love Steranko. I showed you that cool that book about him that someone put out.
Oh yeah.
Which funny story about that book, real quick. When I got really into buying these research materials, like you can understand. I
Oh
got in
yeah.
this kick, and I started buying a bunch of them. I bought this one very randomly through like a Canadian site that I remember thinking, I don't think I'm ever gonna get this book. Like I thought they stole my money. And then it's out of the blue, like 4, 5, 6 months later, it showed up. I was like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah, that happens sometimes. Believe me.
I was grateful. I was
Oh
grateful.
yeah.
So
No, I completely understand that feeling.
all right. This is great. This is a lot of fun, man. I love this. All right. So I'm gonna actually what I'm gonna do is one of your things, I'm gonna use that to talk about, and we'll talk about, I think, at a greater context. So this is one of my favorite things.
Yeah.
And that's gonna be, I'll let you kind of throw it up here. I'll throw it up here. Talk about this and we'll piggyback off
Oh,
you'll get why
yeah.
I'm
No,
piggybacking off of this.
these were very valuable to me. When I
What
because
are these? Yeah, what's the
the
name?
American Comic Book Chronicle is a decade by decade book series about what
Yeah.
was going on in comics during that time.
Mhm.
And my God, it helped me get some. Now I should mention here, I got like a little comment from Kurt Busiek not too long ago about them getting something wrong, which it happens. It's history books. You
Yeah,
you
sure.
have to account for that a bit. But again, this is a year by year timeline of what was happening in comic books, and
Mhm.
my God, it was so helpful because it puts in like what came around, who was around during certain years. Like a good character I bring up about this is Batwoman.
Mm, okay.
Uh, the original version of Batwoman was introduced in 1956. Now, why I bring that up is simply because you want to know who else was also introduced in 1956?
Hold on, let me think here. Um, Now it wasn't Wonder Woman.
At the Flash, Barry Allen.
Okay, Barry Allen's Flash. Okay, okay.
And here's the thing: Batwoman is often associated with the golden age of comics,
Interesting.
but she came
Okay.
out during the Silver Age, like the early Silver Age. But she's very much part of the old style of Batman.
True, because she's like the red. We're talking about the not the red version. I'm sorry, the black and yellow version, right?
Yeah, that
Yeah,
one. The
yeah.
original 1950s Batwoman, and it kind of was important to get that kind of context of like, man. And it also kind of goes into like what was Batman comics were like, and then you realize that basically the Silver Age for most of it, until the Adam West TV show, was terrible for Batman.
Oh yeah. Well, that's a whole different thing. And now tell me this: is this out of print, or can you get this still pretty
So
easily?
you can actually get them PDF digital, and that's how I got them through to Tomorrow's website.
Tomorrow's. That's a put
Yeah,
a pin in that, people.
Tomorrow's TW, like two.
Oh, we'll be talking about them in a second. But that's why I wanted to bring this up now. But yeah, so that's how. But so physically, you're probably to get the whole set. It's probably going to be a little more difficult, I imagine.
Yes, but if you want to kind of get a good idea, I recommend chunking it and seeing like what era and what years you want to know about, and focus on that.
Sure.
Though certain eras like the Golden Age and Silver Age have 2 volumes attached to them,
Wow.
and I can't blame them.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Good point.
Those are like the 2 eras where it's like, yeah, so much was happening that it's like, yeah, you got to split it into 5 years each because you got to
Sure.
talk about World War II, you got to talk about the issues, you got to talk about transitions, you got to talk about like again, I understand why those two specific eras are split into two.
No, for sure. And and I'm glad you because I've seen those around because I'll explain why. But I kind of dismiss it. So you highly recommend if you're someone like myself who loves history and the consuming like history and knowledge of the comic book medium, you're definitely recommending picking those up or at least reading those at some point, correct?
Reading those, especially because again, they go year by year, and they have like
Wow.
timelines in the books themselves. Like they'll each year they'll do a full timeline of events of what happened that year in comics.
Hmm.
So you
That
get
you're
and
selling me.
also major
Selling me.
historical events that were happening around the time to kind
Mhm.
of give you an idea. Like one of the reasons I like them a lot is they kind of try to get you the idea of what the era was like,
Mhm.
and not just this was
Here's just
happened.
knowledge. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
no,
yeah,
I
yeah.
actually posted a bunch of. I was actually reading through them, and I posted a bunch of them in my on Twitter. Of like, I posted each timeline page that I thought was pretty cool to look at because it kind of gives you like, oh yeah, that's the year JFK died.
Oh shit. Yeah.
Like, or
Right, right.
Vietnam. Like, it gives you an idea of those years and kind of gets you in the mindset of, okay, this was happening around then. What was,
Yeah. Well, so piggybacking off of that, because I've actually seen those, and you brought up one of the things you brought up that separately from what we're going to talk about, which you can imagine is we're going to talk about Tomorrow's, which is
yeah.
the publishing company that put those out. And you brought it up because they put, for those who don't know, Tomorrow's isn't it run by or not run, but isn't Roy Thomas involved with them, or is
Yeah,
that
Roy Thomas is heavily involved, and I know he's controversial right now for various reasons, but
yes, we don't like
we're not going to talk about that right now, and I'd rather not get into that because that is a
yeah.
whole other conversation of what is editorially right. But okay,
Yeah. but but anyway, Tomorrow's is a basically kind of what what Exalted was talking about, that whole but more broad, as far as they have a magazine called Back Issue. And with Back Issue, they do all kinds of retrospective or interviews of whether it be about creators
uh,
or about
that
characters.
that magazine has been so helpful to me of like trying to find out of, okay, do we have any word on this specific thing I can find?
and
Like,
And you get great stuff. Like, this is the Neil Adams issue. They did a bunch of interviews from and retro like reprints from different Neil Adams interviews and whatnot, and really focus on and people writing about some commentary on the character, on the character, the person that is Neil Adams. Super really fascinating material. You get fun stuff like this. Like, I haven't read this one yet, but I'm meaning to, about Nightwings, coming in from like
um,
the Bronze Age.
recently they put out a book about Steve Ditko and his lesser known work that I
Mhm.
would regularly recommend. Mostly because it has an interesting, it has a pitch for Batman that Steve Ditko wanted to do.
No shit.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
very interesting little piece of history of, um, like, oh, and here's the thing, it kind of also predicts a lot of stuff that Batman would actually do in later comics. Like, you know how some artists never draw Batman's mouth and they always put him in shadow?
Yeah.
Steve Ditko wanted to do that as his like main image for Batman.
Wow.
And he had ideas like making the fins on his gloves be able to slice things, which is now very common.
Yeah, it's pretty, dude. I mean, he was ahead of his time, and let's be real. I mean, Spider-Man's the best costume of all time, and
Yeah.
so, in my opinion, so I mean,
But yeah, no, Steve, like, it never happened, but we never got like the full Steve Ditko Batman. But there are various issues you can read and kind of see, man, he could have probably innovated the character. But yeah, no, Tomorrow's is great. And despite the Roy Thomas connection, they're also like the only company that like puts out stuff about like Archie superheroes.
oh, it's funny you should mention that, Exalted One.
Yep, I have that book.
This, I listen, and this thing is extensive. Like, this is not, this got actual comic books because they are public domain.
Honestly, honestly, that book is helpful for another reason. Is that it also talks about like nobody writes enough about Archie, and that's the
Yeah.
one of the only books that just because it doesn't talk about like their main selling point, like they're not talking about Archie and Sabrina, but it's also one of the only places where you kind of are getting Archie comics history.
Yeah.
Eh,
Well, and so tomorrow's would put out, so really quickly they put out like this. By the way, I love this cover. This is fantastic. This is a great issue, by the way. As a giant Spider-Man fan, my favorite fictional character of all time,
Oh
this
yeah,
is definitely worth. Go buy it if you haven't bought this one, Exalted. Go buy this back issue. It's great.
I
Okay.
definitely will look into that one because Spider-Man's my favorite superhero. If I did make it obvious on my Twitter.
Yeah.
So
I've seen it. Go check out. It's issue 145. Number
I'll
145.
I'll definitely buy that at some point because again, like it's definitely one of those ones I want to order. And I have a couple books on order from them as well, just because, like I said, I have the specific comics companion. There's a company that did the Rocketeer.
Ooh, they did Rocketeer one.
Not the Rocketeer himself, but the company that published him.
Oh, I see. What's it called? Shit. Fuck. What is it called? I know what you're talking about, though. Yeah.
Yeah.
But really quickly. So you talk about the companions, right? And they put out some banger of companions. This one, my friend from the Batman Book Club, which is a podcast, I'm not sure if you've listened to before, Exalted. That's
Yeah.
one of my favorite comic book podcasts. My boy Ryan does that. He got me onto this bad boy. This is fantastic. You talk about, and this is all tomorrow's people. This is great stuff. Like this basically chronicles Carmine Infantino redesigning the bat symbol to to the Silver Age era where Batman's terrible, to the Adam West stuff, to Neil Adams, Denny O'Neil coming back. This is like basically pornography for me, to be quite honest. I'm like, just
Yeah,
give this to
no.
me,
I
seriously.
want to. The one books I want to get are the Flash books. They made
Mhm.
two of them.
Okay.
Um, the those ones are out of print though, so I have to like find them secondhand.
Yeah. Danny Fingeroff, by the way. Danny Fingeroff is such an underrated writer and editor. Like, he doesn't get enough respect. Love that guy.
I
Dark
I
Hawk is
really
extremely underrated.
I really gotta talk about him sometime because I also want to talk about this the Deadly Foes of Spider-Man.
Dude, yes, I did that. Yes.
Um,
Deadly Foes is incredible. Lethal,
like
deadly, hell yeah.
look, Lethal is the follow-up. We are like, yeah, okay, it's there.
Yeah.
Um, uh, but Deadly Foes of Spider-Man, I actually think is very important for Marvel Comics because it's some of Marvel's first real supervillain focus stories.
Yeah. Mhm.
I don't think without that book you don't get stuff like Thunderbolts.
Yeah. Agreed.
Um,
Agreed. It's a really well written, like well paced story, and Spider Man's barely in it.
it's a good look. Whoever had was like, whoever I imagine that was just hard to pitch. It's like, hey, I want to do a story where Spider-Man, where the perspective is on the villains and not Spider-Man himself.
Well,
And
it's John Byrne, I believe. In the first page, it says John Byrne's original idea. So I think Byrne's idea, it was his original pitch that he
it
kind of just threw out there.
it does not surprise me. Like John had like a lot of interesting ideas, various stuff that again, I but yeah, no, like but yeah, like Danny Figueroff is great. Love his stuff. Darkhawk is definitely an underrated run. I really want to talk about
Absolutely.
because
Hmm.
I would like okay, a lot of people would consider like the best run ever, and it's 90s as hell, so I understand like that perspective.
Yeah,
You
no,
know,
it definitely run. Listen, I jumped off Darkhawk probably around issue 25, 30. If
but
it gets a little in the weeds, if you will. But I'd say the first 3 years of that are pretty. Like when he meets up with Venom on the island, I mean, come on, it's so
so
good.
the way I've actually recommended and sold Darkhawk to people, and this is something I've had to do, is that I've connected it to Power Rangers stuff because
Oh, word, yeah.
that's like and if people are ticked off by that, I get it.
Hey,
But
look who
if you
wrote
get
him.
people into a character, to me, it's like that's what matters.
Yeah, exactly. Who cares? I mean, dude. I mean, I love me some Darkhawk. And you know what? Oh my God, what's his name? The guy who wrote the recent miniseries. He's writing Radiant Black. I'm totally blanking
Oh,
on his name.
Oh yeah, no,
Um,
I know because he wrote Power
Kyle,
Rangers
Kyle
too.
Higgins, Kyle Higgins,
Yeah.
Kyle Higgins. Yeah. So when you talk about the Power Rangers, that he's a giant Power Ranger fan, and he wrote some good Power Rangers comics I actually read. That's that's beyond my era. Like I missed out. I was right at the end of like right when they were getting hot, and I wasn't
Yeah,
quite
I'm
quite
a
age yet.
Yeah, I'm a Power Rangers kid. I was part of that generation. I have
No,
the
no, but
Megazords and stuff,
yeah.
so
Well, but that's what I'm saying though. Like, but like Darkhawk represents that. Like that
yeah.
he like that, which is really cool. So anyway, we'll get some more and then we'll wrap up. Wrap up on tomorrow's. I wanted to put a pin on something you were saying earlier, which was this is about the oh my god, this is this one. I meant to say a different one. Where is it? I gotta find it. About the New Gods, a companion for that. This is a great one too, man. You'll love this.
Oh yeah, that's a good one to have.
Yeah, there's one I wanted to show you. Where is it? I got so many, dude. I love these things. I could read these all day long. Like
Oh
seriously,
no, like they're very handy reference guides to have because, like I said, like it's good to have a general history books, but then you want specific history, and these are great for that.
yeah, for sure. Where did it go? I'm trying to find the one I want to show off that I thought was great. Now I'm like, oh shit, I didn't lose it. I recently moved, and now I'm like, oh no, I didn't lose this thing, did I? God dang it! One second, I gotta find this thing. It's gonna bother me. Is which one? Do you have any of those that I'm showing you? Do you recognize any of those?
I have like I said, I have the MLJ companion. I have like a bunch of this
Okay.
stuff. Unfortunately, I came in kind of late to this stuff a bit because like a bunch
Uh,
of these are out of print, and like finding them through comic book stores, and the website doesn't have all of them. It's like, okay,
Comic stores are your friend, man. I found the Kirby 100 issue at my comic store
oh
randomly.
yeah,
I was like, oh hell yeah, dude! This thing goes for like $100 online. you know.
yeah.
Um, Really quick, I'll go down this murderer's row here, dude. Talk about my boy Sal. You
Sal
know,
Buscema's great. Like I've seen him at shows before.
yeah, he's great. So this is what I wanted to show you. This is what I'm talking about. Like you probably will. This thing is
Oh yeah, I
sorry,
I've been looking at. I've been trying to find a good book for that to kind of get because the implosion era is such a weird era for
fascinating,
DC.
fascinating.
And it's not
Um,
even like to blame on like the comics. It was also just like weather and shit, which are like,
dude, it's crazy. All right, so I'm having a blast doing. I could do this all day. I could do this all day. Okay, let's do a fast version of this. We've done most of them, I think. That actually, this is good. All right, so the last one I wanted to really discuss with you because I'm very curious. I've been hesitant to go down this route. Okay,
sure.
and you probably the last thing you probably have is probably know what it is. You want to lead into it? I'm assuming you
Um,
have a
I brought up the DK books, which are the DK books for like Superman, Batman, the Ultimate Guides, and they're very interesting books to talk on.
okay.
Um, now, uh, now I now to tell you the truth, I want to bring up like the differences between the Marvel and DC ones.
Please, yeah. I thank you. Because I have a lot. Because really quick before we go into it, I wanted to just give you my experience with DK. I have no I have no ill will towards them at all. I'm a giant Star Wars fan, so I have a lot of DK guidebooks, but it's a
Yeah,
lot easier when it's more broad. Like you're talking about a universe across that transcends all mediums. Whereas this, and this is what I wanted to get into Exalted here. How in depth and legit are these? Because if they are
so
legit, please.
the Marvel ones are ones I would recommend out of hand.
Interesting. Okay. Okay.
Because the Marvel ones go decade by decade. They
Okay.
go like the Spider-Man ones will start with the Silver Age and tell you about all the villains that were introduced during that period that they feel were important. Like
Hmm.
so you'll get pages dedicated to Doc Ock, Powers, and stuff like that. So they are really great for that. The X-Men one, yeah, they do that too. So they'll go into like, hey, this was when this character was introduced. This was so again, they give you kind of a good general overview of the fictional history. The DC ones are okay. The problem with the DC ones is they reflect the editorial views of the characters at the time.
Hmm.
And that's kind of bad on a lot of levels because, okay, so if you start with Batman, they talk about his post-crisis history
Okay.
only. You
Okay.
only get snippets of like his of Elseworlds, Golden Age, stuff like that. Like you get small snippets, and you'll get like characters, but but it's like, hey, this is Batman's origin at the time, and they don't go over like, to give you an idea. You want to know I have like the first edition of the Batman one. You want to know what
Sure.
book they don't mention?
What? No, don't tell. Hold on. Don't tell me you're one. Don't tell me you're one.
No, they mention year one.
Okay, good.
But if you were a Batman fan, you would like they don't mention Dark Knight Returns.
Well, but that's an Elseworlds thing, right? I mean,
Yeah, but
that's
they mention Elseworlds. They have a
okay.
page. But
That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. That's my favorite comic of all time. One of
yeah,
them,
like
anyway.
yeah, so I recommend and while they give you good bios and you can kind of get a sense of the comics at the time, like they can kind of be good like, okay, these are what the comics are like now during this year. The DC ones. The Marvel ones, they'll go into detail about like the various characters. So you'll be like, oh, these were the villains the Hulk was fighting during the 90s. These were the ones
That's
during the
interesting.
80s.
Okay, that's fascinating. Okay, now you're selling me on it because the DK they are very organized and for the Star Wars stuff, right?
Um, so
But
if you kind of want to get a good idea, some of the older editions
mhm,
are on the Internet Archive.
mhm.
So you can actually take a look at them
Okay.
and kind of get a good sense of them. But yeah, like the Batman ones are this weird, reflecting the views at the time. So they'll have pages of like saying Bruce Wayne is the mask, Batman is the real dude. And I know
Mm,
that's a debate on Twitter, but that's also one of the reasons I say it's the editorial view of Batman.
interesting. Okay.
While
Interesting.
the while the DK guides for and now the DK guides will mention like powers, the minutia of stuff like that for the Marvel heroes. But the Marvel stuff will give you like, oh, this is how the story changed over time. Meanwhile, it's like, guys, Batman's history was just like this. There was nothing else. Golden Age, Silver Age, Bronze Age. Who cares? This is Batman, and it's like, so. I think both are worth reading to kind of show you like how they view the characters sometimes. But
Mhm.
yeah, no, like so with Marvel stuff, you'll get like a general history. But I will mention, the books that are just listing characters, those are great just to find like weirdo, obscure DC and Marvel characters. Those I
Yeah.
really recommend.
Well,
Of
yeah,
just like,
yeah. Go ahead.
of just like, oh, I never heard of this character. Okay, maybe I'll look him up later. Those can be fun.
Well, and as we're wrapping up here, I'll kind of throw up a couple more here, and I'm glad you can. For those who don't know, yes, you can read a lot of these on a Wikipedia page or whatever, but it's just more fun to sit down and really get like into the weeds on this stuff, and that's why I think the DK books can be a lot of fun. And when you're analyzing and organizing and whatnot, so
Yeah,
make it very clear.
they're not like the main thing I would do. But if you want like a general history of the character,
Yeah,
they're great.
and
They're great for
yeah,
that.
and you can get like, without so that way you can jump into any era like you were saying and like get an idea of like what's going on and have a brief idea of what is generally not be completely lost, which I'd say you don't really need to do that anyway for any comic for the most part, in my opinion. I think it's overrated that people say like I need a jumping on point. It's like, well, there's
The way I often talk to people about this subject is that comic books were meant to be as easy to get into from any issue you start with because that's how they had to be sold.
yeah,
So you should at
exactly.
least think about that. I
Yeah.
understand. What I think people really want when they say that is they want the perfect reading experience for this.
Exactly. Thank you. You nailed it. Perfect. That is a
And
great.
I'm like,
Yeah.
listen, there are definitely different ways to go about it, and whatever you do is fine. I often just say, listen, you want to start X-Men? You're going to have to take the beast that is Claremont eventually. Start now
Yeah.
or start later, but you're going to
Yeah.
get to there eventually.
Or just you don't have to start at the beginning either. Like I started, in the Inferno Saga for God's sakes. I mean, that's like, but you know what? Sorry, I'm trying to clean up as I'm talking here. The thing is, I started in the Claremont era or in the Inferno part, and let me tell you, it was weird. I was lost every once in a while as a kid, but the stories are so good, I didn't care, and that's the
Yeah,
thing.
there was that. Hell, like if I want to, technically the Spider-Man comics I read that were contemporary to me, the ones I started with, I was at the end of the Howard Mackie run.
Whew. Oh man.
I
Yeah.
I had to deal with a lot of BS, but there were some good bits there. I didn't mind but I ended up having to start with JMS and Ultimate Spider-Man as comics. That's how I had to really
I
get
love
there.
it. But that's a good starting point though
Yeah.
too. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
in my
No,
opinion. So,
I don't
you
mind
know.
that. I ended up having to. Admittedly, though, my first Spider-Man comics were I had digest collections of
Mhm.
the old and essentials, so I was able to read the old stuff too.
Yeah,
But yeah,
which
no, like I started near the end of the Howard Mackie run. I had to kind of figure out stuff. I had to figure out like, okay, does Volume 2 of Amazing Spider-Man, is that like a reboot or is that like a continuation of the old comics? What's
oof,
up
oof.
with that?
Yeah, that's a whole different. I totally I ditched out by then, and I came back kind of like toward the tail end of JMS's run. So,
I
I've been back ever since.
yeah, I've seen comments about like Howard Mackey was burnt toast by then. It's like, yeah, no, I understand. Like, I wouldn't say those are great issues, but it's what I had. Thankfully, like Paul Jenkins was starting to write Spider-Man at the
Yeah,
time,
yeah,
and I really love his run on it.
yeah.
But
No,
yeah,
totally.
like it was a whole thing of just trying to figure all that stuff out.
Well, and the thing is, as we'll wrap up here, I have a couple more things I'll throw out to you and see what you think. I think like you said it best. Everyone wants the perfect jumping on like the reading experience for something when you just really have to figure out with superhero comics. You kind of feel it out like what you're into
Yeah.
because it is so vast, but that's not scary, especially in today's standards where you can go on and read them for
Well,
free
I
legally.
often say with this stuff is that like there's more volume ones of where to start if you like just find a series of trades that you could start with and you'll probably have a better experience than you think.
Yeah, and one thing I'll say before we wrap up, I want to add that I do wish, like Mark Miller actually said it too. I wish that they bring back the essential line and sell them super cheap, and then have people, and then put them in supermarkets or whatever.
Yeah,
Because yeah,
here's the
sorry.
thing, you can just put like a slightly off-colored newsprint if you want color comics too. Like in all seriousness, I think comics should invest in different formats for like because here's the thing. Omnibuses omnibuses are like for the people who are like gonna majorly collect. Those just because you'll have cheaper
I'm not.
versions
Yeah,
doesn't mean
yeah.
like
Go ahead. Sorry.
like you could basically be like, oh yeah, this is for people who want better color, better whatever, or like one of the reasons I like the omnibuses, letter pages. Oh my
Oh
god,
no. Well,
having
dude. Yeah. Sorry.
having access to those is great.
Well, and to be true, I don't know if you knew this about me, Exalted, but I am not an omnibus fan. I'm an Epic Line fan. I'm a pure trade guy. I don't like omnibuses are too big for me. I have a few, and they've been better, but I have like the first like omnibus of Spider-Man, like the Zico and Stan Lee one. That's
Oh
just
yeah,
ginormous. It's way too big. It's way too big. And DC's done a good. I think DC's done better than Marvel for the most part as far as the omnibuses look. And I think DC's figure. I don't want to get on too on tangent, but omnibuses are not my thing, and I don't like a lot of the recoloring they've done either. And so I don't know. Like you said, like we talked about the black and white stuff for kids to go read and like get into. That to me seems like the best way to get people like at least have them readily available. But again, that's a whole different podcast. Really quickly, we'll do some rapid fire stuff. I'd be remiss and I feel I wouldn't be a good person and a good friend if I didn't talk about my buddy's book, Understanding Superhero Comic Books, which is fantastic. Go out there and check this out. I've talked about it before. It's a great Christmas gift item. This is very informational. Like we're talking like if you want to know about the medium, like, and not saying the superheroes are all the comic book medium, but it's a good portion, right? Exalted, but
Oh yeah.
um, but Alex goes from like we're talking like the dawn of sequential art. He goes that far and goes deep and explains things, and it's fantastic. And he put a lot of work into this, and it shows, and it's great. And I highly recommend doing it. And Alex, you're the man. Appreciate you crazy. Last couple things. Talk about. I love these. I love the old
Oh yeah.
Marvel Universe like handbooks. Like talk about learning. Like these essential ones are so perfect. They're black
I
and white. Oh God.
I wish Marvel would just keep those in prints, just because those are some fascinating timepieces.
80s,
And
man. Oh, I'm just like this. Like just keep it
and
close to me.
people like I love the fact that the reason Cyclops has powers from the punch dimension is because the first official handbook of the Marvel Universe listed that as how he got his powers. They didn't actually check how he did, and that's why
Wow.
we have the punch dimension.
Wow. I didn't even know that. Didn't even
Oh
know
yeah.
that. And then stuff like this, like the Teshin stuff.
Oh, I have that. I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah, this is good stuff. Like it's really informational. Really again, beautiful. Like again, get real art here. You know, I mean, it's
Oh God, I need to get I want to get the Amazing Spider-Man volumes from them
me
because
too. Me too.
they're big, and I know we were talking about the omnibuses, but they also present the comics as they were.
They're so
So
good.
it's like, I got to get those at some point.
I do too. I'm with you. I resisted for a while, but I'm like, I need to get it. So
Yeah.
but this is I mean, this is another great time capsule. Learn a lot about the medium itself here. Yeah, this was a Exalted. This is is there anything I'm missing that you want to talk about really quick before we head out?
Like I said, another good one, and I forgot to bring this one up, is the comic book history of comics.
You were telling me that. Okay, yeah.
It's by Fred Van Lente, and I forget. God, they also did one for animation too. So you
Really?
know,
Okay.
so like I said, and they have a color and black and white edition. I prefer the black and. Ryan Dunlavey is the artist for it. I needed to look that up because I hate forgetting the artist's name sometimes. So the comic book history of comics, it's a biased one, but it's also a fun one, and I also think it's not like bad. Like it also has like a lot of interesting facts and various other things that I would really recommend.
Yeah, no, okay. I'll definitely check it out. The comic book history of comics. Is that what you said it was called?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I'll check that out. Really quick, my boy Sketchcraft here, who Exalted, I'm not sure if you know that he is drawing a Spawn miniseries called Spawn Kills Every Spawn. Yeah, super great stuff. It's fantastic. Go look it up on there. He's a great artist. He's worked on all kinds of stuff out there. I think he's worked in a lot of video game stuff out there. But my boy Rob, aka Sketchcraft, my boy, he's coming on in a couple weeks. We're gonna talk about Mad Max Fury Road. Which
he brought up in this comment that I remember the Batman Year One Absolute Edition. So Batman Year One's an interesting book to reprint because that's a book that needs newsprint because the artist actually thought of the colors and worked for it. And if you actually read like magazine gloss versions, it looks way uglier by comparison.
Oh yeah.
Not that David Mazzucchelli's a bad artist at all. And I think you can tell this is good art. It's just lesser quality because it's shinier, it gets out the lines, the colors do not work on magazine.
Like, well, I would say a lot of comics don't work well on the glossy paper it's on now. It's too glare. Every comic I have with a light glares. It's annoying.
We were talking about the omnibuses, but I have the Roger Stern omnibus for Spider-Man. And it uses a matte style paper that's a bit like it's not magazine quality, like it's not shiny all the time. But it's more closer to newsprint, so it has like a better look to it.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying here. And really quickly, the absolute of Year One is on my wish list. I need to get that. I love Year One. It's not my favorite. Dark Knight Returns is always been my favorite Batman story because I grew up on it. Long story. We'll talk about it one day. But no, when one of the co-hosts you have, I don't know if you've seen the other episodes, Exalted, my best friend Chris Clow, he's a giant Batman fan. He's him and Ryan from the Batman Book Club was just raving about the original colors and the pages, and I saw it with my own eyes at his house, and I was like, God damn, I need to get this because I like Year One, but man, I was like, these original colors and pages, like chef's kiss. I almost wish they, and this will they'll never do this, but like on Infinite or Unlimited, Marvel Unlimited, I do wish they'd have a thing where they have modern colors and they could go back to like, it could be a preference. Like some people don't care. They like the brighter colors, which is fine. But I wish I could go back closer to the original colors. Like
I wish they would give you options for actual scans versus rescans.
Exactly.
Various, like, in all seriousness, there's a lot of options. Like I actually prefer, like, if I'm looking for comic book scans, I actually prefer directly from the issues myself. Because my God, how else am I going to find the Grant Morrison masturbate during Thanksgiving to save my comic rant?
Oh God, not that. No, not that. Not that. Not that.
I know way too much about things. Anyway,
that is a. Listen, this show is a pro Grant Morrison show. We have a whole sub series about called Knights Never Die about the Grant Morrison Batman run. So I mean, it's we don't skip out here. So Exalted, this was a blast, man. I ain't gonna lie. Like, you never know what you kind of ask someone you don't really know on the show, and you exceeded all my expectations. And I'm gonna have you on as long as you want on. I'll have you back on.
Like I said, I'm definitely willing to be on. If if the timing allows me and everything else, I definitely am open to it.
Awesome, man. Well, listen, there's a lot of runs we're gonna have. I'm gonna be thinking about you, bringing you on for this, and I really appreciate you helping promote the show and everything. I really do, and yeah, you obviously sounds like you only have one brand place you go to, but go ahead and tell people where they can find you.
I'm on Twitter specifically just as Exalted Speed. I technically have a YouTube channel that I have left to the dust right now to get better editing equipment. And also just eventually I do actually want to try and get more informational videos out there. As best I can. I really want to do a video on... I want to do videos on what I call the origins of Star Wars.
Oh.
Looking at the inspirations of various...
Dark Side and Flash Gordon.
I want to talk about, like, a lot of people... When people look at Star Wars and they do Star Wars content, I feel they only look at Star Wars and not the vast swath of what led to it.
Oh yeah, trust me.
And I would love to do something on Flash Gordon specifically, and just I also want to investigate the Laureline and Valerian controversy with that. Yeah, well, man, I went down that rabbit hole when the movie came out, and I was reading about that. It was interesting. And for those who don't know, I mean, you probably already know this, but whatever. But George Lucas was a big comic book fan. People don't realize that. The dude owned a comic book store.
Exactly. Thank you. People don't know that. They don't. I had a friend, really quick, Exalted. I had a friend who worked at Lucasfilm. He did not know that.
Yeah, no. In all seriousness, like the entire clone stuff from the Revenge, from Attack of the Clones and all that stuff, was probably from Jack Kirby. It's that's all just the Cadmus stuff from New Gods.
Well, I mean, let's be real. Darkseid, Orion. I mean, there's.
Oh yeah, there's probably a lot of inspirations. Like, it's not just one thing. And I want to tackle what possibly is Jack Kirby inspired too. Like, just do like, okay, we're not going to say that this was definitely inspired by Jack Kirby, but we're going to at least investigate it and make those comparisons. Just try and be like, again, it's something I want to do eventually, and don't expect it to come out like this month or next year.
Yeah,
it's something I want to do when I have time,
Yeah.
and place for it.
Well, you know, Exalted, I'm going to say this right now, and I think I speak for like the 3 people that watch this. I say it jokingly, there's a few people watching, which I really appreciate you, everyone who already has. I just want to say, I don't know if you even need editing equipment, homie. I think you just need to get on and stream and just talk, because you got it. So just know that I support you.
I want to at least make it visually interesting, because I could probably talk. That's definitely fine, but I want at least some good visuals.
You can if, like I do, just gotta bring them up. I mean, I'm not saying I'm doing great, but I'm just saying, like, sometimes people just want to hear and just get. Yeah, I feel you. Let's just say this: anytime you need help with streaming, you want someone to stream with to kind of go off of, you holler at your boy.
Sure.
I got your back.
Thank you, man.
So,
I appreciate it.
Of course.
And like I said,
but
yeah, like I said, it's definitely, there's a lot of stuff I'm willing to talk on, and like I said, if people want to feel like they want to ask me, you know, it's one of those things that just like, hey, you know, I'm here to talk about various history. I know a lot, and I know a lot of other nerd history too. So
yeah, for sure. No, yeah, exactly. The Spidey dude, he might be knocking down your door here soon. Exalted, my boy Zach is, you know, shut the. He's joking because I plan so far ahead. Exalted. He's like, yeah, you asked me if I'd be on a show like 4 months from now. I'm like, listen, I ain't plan. I'm a planner. Oh, I love you, Rob.
It's fair.
Yeah, I mean, come on, you get it. Like, I asked you a month ago, you understood. You got it. So, anyway, yeah, Exalted Speed, which, by the way, Exalted Speed 2099 is a fantastic name. I'm mad at you because you took 2099. I can't use it ever because of you, because I can't. I just can't do it.
Admittedly, it's not like a permanent thing. I call myself the Amazing Exalted Speed, the Spectacular Exalted Speed. I just like messing with comic book names.
Fair enough. But ever since I saw 2099 on yours, I'm like, God, you took it. I can't use it again. So, anyway, go please subscribe to the Comic Binge, hit the like button, yada yada yada. Exalted, I'm super. This has been a blast, and every time we end this show, I always just say, or usually Chris will say, read more comics, but he's not here, so I'll do it for him. Read